My son-in-law married my daughter for my house. I knew it. But when he showed up with a notary right after the wedding to throw me out, he had no idea I wasn't just an old man. I was the architect of his downfall. He thought he was closing a deal, but he was walking into a trap I had been setting for months. Before I tell you how a retired logistics analyst turned the tables on a con artist, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And be sure to like and subscribe because you're going to want to hear how this ends. It was a Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. The sun was just starting to warm the porch steps when the doorbell rang. Not the gentle chime of a neighbor or the quick buzz of a delivery driver, but a long, impatient press. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Kevin stood there, a smirk plastered on his face like cheap paint. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. Beside him, a nervous-looking man in a rumpled blazer clutched a briefcase to his chest. My son-in-law Kevin didn't wait for an invitation. He brushed past me, his cologne filling the hallway my wife Carol had so carefully wallpapered 30 years ago. He walked into my living room as if he already owned it. "Morning, David," he said, not even bothering to use a more familiar term. "I hope you've started packing. The new owners want to take possession by the end of the week." He gestured towards the man still hovering by the door. "This is Mr. Peters. He's a notary. We're here to finalize the last of the paperwork." I closed the front door softly and turned to face him. I kept my hands steady, my voice even. This was a system just like any other. And every system has a weakness. "What paperwork would that be, Kevin?" He let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like tearing metal. "Oh, let's not play games. Amelia and I sold the house, it's done. And it's time for you to move somewhere more appropriate. We found a lovely room for you at Golden Meadows Senior Living. They have round-the-clock care." His words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I didn't feel anger, not yet. That would come later. Right now, what I felt was a cold, hard clarity, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. I walked over to the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of water, my movements slow and deliberate. My hand didn't shake. Kevin's confidence began to waver just a little. He expected yelling. He expected tears. He didn't expect silence. I took a slow sip of water. "My wife Carol loved this house," I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the room. "She planted that maple tree in the backyard the year Amelia was born. She used to say its roots were our family's roots, deep and strong." I was feeding him backstory, a detail meant to underscore the depth of his betrayal. I wanted him to understand exactly what he was trying to steal. It wasn't just brick and mortar. It was a life. Kevin's patience snapped. The polished veneer cracked, revealing the ugly greed beneath. "That's ancient history," he spat. "This is about the future. A future you're holding back. You're becoming a liability, David. You either sign this paper agreeing to the transfer, or we'll be forced to use the medical power of attorney Amelia has. We'll have you declared incompetent. Your choice." He slapped a thick folder down on the coffee table. The sound echoed in the quiet house. It was an ultimatum. It was his checkmate. He just didn't realize he was playing on my board. I didn't even glance at the folder. I looked at the clock on the mantelpiece, a wedding gift from Carol's parents. It was 10:04. Everything was proceeding on schedule. I turned my calm gaze back to Kevin, whose smug expression was beginning to return, thinking he had won. "That sounds great," I said, my voice as level as a surveyor's line. "But before we do any of that, let's take a trip down to the police station first. I have a feeling Detective Miller is very interested in meeting you." The smirk vanished from Kevin's face, instantly replaced by a flicker of confusion, then alarm. "What the hell are you talking about, old man?" I allowed myself a small, thin smile. It didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, I just sent him a little package. A file about 2 inches thick. I labeled it the Marshall Properties Arizona Project. Does that name ring a bell, Kevin?" The color drained from his face. It was as if I had pulled a lever and every drop of blood had rushed from his head. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, and in a way he had. The ghost of all the lives he thought he had successfully ruined. Just then the back door opened, and my daughter Amelia walked in, a bright, clueless smile on her face. A smile that froze on her lips as she took in the scene. Her husband pale and sweating. A strange man with a briefcase by the door. And her father standing there, no longer the frail old man she had decided he was, but a gatekeeper. And he had just locked the gate for good. His words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A normal man would have shouted. A weaker man would have pleaded. I did neither. I watched him, this predator, who had sniffed out what he thought was a wounded animal. I felt no surge of anger, no tremor of fear. What I felt was a profound, cold clarity. The final piece of a complex system clicking into place. He expected a reaction. He craved one. It would have validated his power. I chose to give him nothing. Instead, I turned away from him and walked to the kitchen counter. My movements were slow, deliberate, the way they had been for 72 years. I opened the cupboard, took out a clean glass, and filled it with water from the tap. My hand was perfectly steady. Through the reflection in the kitchen window, I could see Kevin's posture tighten. My calmness was an insult to his victory. It was a language he didn't speak, and it unnerved him. Good. I took a slow sip of the cool water, letting it ground me in the moment. Then I turned back to face him, leaning lightly against the counter. My eyes drifted past him through the sliding glass door to the backyard. My wife Carol, she loved this house, I said. My voice quiet but carrying through the room with the weight of memory. She planted that maple tree by the fence the year Amelia was born. We had just moved in. The tree was no bigger than a sapling. She watered it every single day that first summer. I paused, letting the image settle in the room. She used to say its roots were our family's roots, that as long as it stood strong, so would we. She believed that. I wasn't talking to Kevin anymore. I was placing a fact into the room, a testament to what he was trying to desecrate. It wasn't just brick and mortar. It was a life. It was my life. My words had the opposite effect of what he might have expected. The mention of my late wife, of the family he had married into, didn't soften him. It enraged him. The polished mask of the concerned son-in-law finally cracked, revealing the ugly, desperate greed beneath. That's ancient history. He spat, his voice a low snarl. Sentimental garbage. This is about the future. It's about reality. And the reality is, you are becoming a liability, David. A burden. The word hung in the air, clinical and cruel. You either sign this paper agreeing to the transfer and the move, or we will be forced to use the medical power of attorney Amelia has. He picked up the thick folder from the coffee table and held it up like a weapon. We will have you declared incompetent by a doctor who understands the situation. We'll prove you can't manage your own affairs. It will be messy, but the outcome will be the same. Your choice. Sign it nicely, or we do it the hard way. He slapped the folder down on the polished wood of the coffee table Carol had refinished herself. The sound echoed in the quiet house. It was an ultimatum. It was his final move in a game he thought he had already won. He just didn't realize he was playing on my board by my rules. And I was about to show him what the real game was. Kevin's ultimatum, the folder he had slapped on the coffee table, lay there between us. It was meant to be the final word, the closing argument in a case he had already decided. He leaned back slightly, a triumphant glint in his eyes, waiting for my inevitable collapse. He expected me to crumble, to beg, to finally break down and accept the pathetic role he and my daughter had written for me. He saw the folder as a hammer. He had no idea I was holding a detonator. I didn't even glance at the folder. My gaze went instead to the old grandfather clock in the corner, a wedding gift from Carol's parents. Its steady, rhythmic ticking had been the heartbeat of this house for nearly 50 years. The minute hand clicked forward. It was 10:04. Everything was proceeding exactly on schedule. I looked back at Kevin, whose smug expression was now tinged with impatience. I allowed myself a small, thin smile. It didn't reach my eyes. "That sounds great," I said, my voice as level and calm as a frozen lake. "But before we sign anything, I think we should take a trip down to the police station first. I have a feeling Detective Miller is very interested in meeting you." The name dropped into the silent room like a stone into a well. Kevin's smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a wave of defensive anger. His whole body tensed, the hunter suddenly realizing the forest had grown quiet for a reason. "What the hell are you talking about, old man?" He snapped, his voice losing its smooth, confident edge. "What nonsense are you trying to pull?" "Oh, it's no nonsense," I replied, keeping my tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "I just sent him a little package a few days ago. A file. Quite a thick one, actually. About 2 inches, I'd say. I took the liberty of labeling it for him. It's titled The Marshall Properties Arizona Project. Does that name ring a bell, Kevin?" I watched him. I watched the confident facade he had built for himself disintegrate in real time. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly pale mask. His eyes, which moments before had been full of predatory arrogance, were now wide with pure, unadulterated fear. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It was as if I had reached inside his chest and unplugged his voice. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. And in a way he had. The ghost of every lie he had ever told, every person he had ever cheated, all rising up at once in this quiet living room in Denver. Just then the back door swung open, and my daughter Amelia breezed in, a bright, clueless smile on her face. "I brought donuts," she chirped. Her smile froze on her lips as she took in the scene. Her husband pale and sweating, looking like a cornered animal. A strange, nervous man clutching a briefcase by the door. And her father standing by the kitchen counter, no longer the frail, forgetful old man she had decided he was, but a gatekeeper. He was a stranger to her now, calm and unreadable. She had no idea what had just happened, but she knew with sickening certainty that everything had changed. She had walked in at the end of her world, and she didn't even know who had set the fire. To understand how we arrived at that frozen moment, with my daughter in the doorway and her husband unmasked in my living room, you have to go back 6 months. You have to go back to the wedding. It was a sunny day in early May, the kind of perfect Colorado afternoon that makes you believe in new beginnings. The ceremony was held in the botanical gardens under a canopy of white roses that I had paid for. Everything was perfect on the surface. But my entire career was built on looking beneath the surface. For 40 years, my world was logistics. I wasn't an engineer or a carpenter. I was a supply chain analyst. My job was to see the entire system at once, to predict failures before they happened, to understand that one loose screw in a warehouse in Omaha could lead to $1 million disaster in Seattle. I moved goods across the country with quiet precision. Every decision was based on data, on patterns. All of it, every calculated risk, and every long night spent staring at spreadsheets, was for one purpose: to build a safe harbor for Amelia after her mother was gone. And standing there watching her in her white dress, I felt a swell of pride so powerful, it almost brought me to my knees. She looked so much like Carol. The same bright eyes, the same laugh that could make you forget your troubles. But there was a fragility in her that her mother never had. A need for approval that made her vulnerable. And my system, the one I had built to protect her, was flashing a warning light. That warning light was named Kevin. At the reception held in a bright, airy hall overlooking the gardens, the feeling only grew stronger. Kevin was the perfect groom. He moved through the crowd with an easy charm, a hand on an uncle's shoulder, and hear a shared laugh with a cousin there. He remembered everyone's name. He complimented my sister's dress. He did everything right. But his eyes were constantly scanning the room, not for his new bride, but for opportunity. He wasn't celebrating a marriage, he was networking. I first overheard it near the bar, where he was talking to a man he'd introduced as a business partner. Her dad's place is a gold mine, Kevin was saying, his voice low but excited. Paid off 3/4 of an acre in a neighborhood where property values are exploding. You tear down that old brick ranch, you could put up a $2 million duplex. Easy. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. An old brick ranch. He was talking about my home, the home where Amelia took her first steps. An hour later, I heard him again, this time talking to a different group of men in expensive suits. The words were almost identical. Prime real estate. Untapped potential. The old man's sitting on a lottery ticket and doesn't even know it. He said it with a laugh, as if it were a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was a business plan. He wasn't seeing a family home, a place of memory and love. He saw a plot of land, an asset to be liquidated. I found Amelia by the wedding cake. She was glowing happier than I had seen her in years. I tried to choose my words carefully. Honey, Kevin seems very focused on the house. She laughed, a tinkling sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, Dad, don't be so cynical. He's a visionary. He sees potential everywhere. Isn't it wonderful? She patted my arm, a dismissive, placating gesture. He's just excited about building a future for us. She didn't see it. She didn't want to see it. She saw a handsome, ambitious man who promised her the world. She didn't see the cold calculation in his eyes. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, I saw them standing together in a quiet corner. I thought it was a tender moment, a bride and groom stealing a minute for themselves. But then I saw what they were looking at. Amelia had her phone out. She was scrolling through photos of my house, the one she had grown up in. And Kevin wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the phone, his expression not of a loving husband, but of a wolf staring at his prize. In that moment, I knew. He hadn't married my daughter. He had executed a merger. And I was the asset he was planning to strip. The wedding wasn't a beginning. It was the beginning of a meticulously planned heist. The unease from the wedding settled into my bones and stayed there. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Then came the Sunday dinner. It was Amelia's idea. She said she missed my cooking, specifically the pot roast her mother had taught me how to make. The request felt like a fragile olive branch, and against my better judgment, I took it. I spent all afternoon preparing the meal, filling the house with the warm, familiar aromas of rosemary and thyme. I told myself I had been overthinking things, that I was just a father worried about his daughter. I was wrong. They arrived looking like a power couple from a magazine cover. Kevin in a cashmere sweater, Amelia in a silk blouse. They brought a bottle of expensive wine and filled the first 20 minutes with cheerful, meaningless chatter about their honeymoon, about their friends, about a new restaurant downtown. It was all a carefully constructed stage. And after we had finished the main course, Kevin decided it was time for the curtain to rise. Speaking of the future, David, he began dabbing his mouth with a napkin. Amelia and I have been putting our heads together on a project. Something we're incredibly excited about. It's an opportunity, really, for all of us. He reached down beside his chair and pulled up a sleek leather portfolio. He placed it on the dining table right next to the half-eaten platter of pot roast. He unzipped it and pulled out a set of large rolled-up blueprints. He spread them out across the table, the crisp paper covering the water rings on the old wood, the scent of fresh ink mingling with the smell of home-cooked food. It felt like a violation. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "This," he said, his voice brimming with a salesman's passion, "is our future, and yours." His finger traced the lines on the paper. "We demolish this structure. It's old, the foundation is settling, and the upkeep is a money pit. In its place, we build a state-of-the-art duplex. 2 units, 3,000 square feet each, high-end finishes, smart home technology. We can sell each one for $1.2 million minimum." He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the deal. And the best part for you, no more burdens. We'll set you up in a luxury penthouse apartment downtown. Concierge service, a gym, a pool on the roof. You won't have to lift a finger. No more mowing the lawn, no more worrying about a leaky roof. It's the perfect retirement plan. He leaned back in his chair, a proud smile on his face, as if he had just offered me the keys to the kingdom. He saw my home as a series of problems to be solved, a burden to be lifted. He couldn't understand that every creak in the floorboards, every scratch on the doorframe, was a memory I cherished. He wasn't offering me a paradise, he was offering me a prison. I looked at the blueprints, at the cold, sterile boxes he wanted to build on the grave of my life. I pushed the papers back towards him. My voice was quiet, but it was as solid as the foundation he had just insulted. The answer is no. Kevin's smile faltered. What? The answer is no, I repeated. This is my home. It is not for sale. It is not a project. It is not an asset to be liquidated. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. Kevin looked at Amelia, a silent command passing between them. My daughter, my only child, turned to me, her face a mask of disappointment and frustration. Dad, don't be like this, she said, her voice sharp. This is an incredible opportunity. Kevin worked so hard on this plan. For us, for the family. Tearing down my home is not an opportunity for this family. Amelia, I said, my patience wearing thin. You're being selfish, she shot back, her voice rising. You're just sitting here in this big empty house while we're trying to build a real future, a better future for everyone. All you have to do is let go of the past a little bit, but you won't even consider it. You only ever think about yourself. The accusation struck me harder than any physical blow. Selfish. After a lifetime of putting her first, of working a job, I didn't always love to give her a life I'd never had. I looked at this woman across my table, and for a moment, I didn't recognize her. I saw Kevin's greed reflected in her eyes. The first major battle had been fought not with strangers, but right here at the table where I had taught her how to hold a fork. The pot roast grew cold. The wine was left untouched. The war for my home had begun. After that disastrous Sunday dinner, a cold silence fell. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from them. No angry calls, no apologies. It was a strategic retreat. I knew with the certainty of a man who has studied systems my whole life that they were simply recalibrating. Their frontal assault had failed, so they would now begin a siege. And it started not with a bang, but with 1,000 tiny insidious cuts. The first was a late notice from the power company Red Ink declaring my account was past due. That was impossible. I paid every bill the day it arrived. I had a system, a ledger I'd kept for 40 years. I went to my desk and pulled it out. There it was, logged in my own neat handwriting, check number, date sent. I called the bank. The check had been cashed a week ago. When I called the power company back with the information, they were apologetic. A clerical error, they said. A glitch in the system. I thought nothing more of it. A week later, I went into the garage to find a long, deep scratch along the passenger side door of my car. It was fresh. White paint from another vehicle was visible in the gash, but the garage had been locked. I was the only one with a key. I felt a disorienting wave of confusion. Had I left it unlocked? Had I gone somewhere and forgotten? For the first time in a long while, I doubted my own memory. That evening, Amelia called. Her voice was syrupy with concern. Dad, Kevin and I were just talking. We were worried we haven't heard from you. Is everything okay? I told her about the car. I heard her sigh on the other end of the line, a practiced sound of pity and exasperation. Oh, Dad, she said softly. Are you sure you're feeling all right? You've seemed a little forgetful lately. Maybe you should make an appointment with Dr. Evans, just for a checkup. The cuts kept coming. My garden shears, which I always kept on a specific hook in the shed, went missing only to turn up a week later in the laundry room. The automatic sprinkler system, which I had just serviced, suddenly malfunctioned, flooding the front lawn. Kevin came over to fix it, making a big show of how the timer had been programmed all wrong. He looked at me with a sad smile. "Don't worry, David. It happens to the best of us." Each incident was small enough to be deniable, to be brushed off as a simple mistake of old age. A lost item, a forgotten bill. But in logistics, you learn that there is no such thing as a coincidence. There are only patterns you haven't identified yet. They were building a case, brick by brick. They were creating a story, not for a courtroom, but for anyone who would listen, for my neighbors, my doctor, for Amelia herself. The story of a confused old man who couldn't take care of himself anymore. A man who needed his loving daughter and son-in-law to step in and manage his affairs. A man who needed to be moved out of his big, valuable house for his own good. I felt like I was living in a house where someone was quietly moving the furniture around every time I left the room, hoping to convince me I was losing my mind. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had forgotten what I did for a living. I wasn't just a sad old man. I was an analyst, and I was about to turn their system inside out. The feeling of being a stranger in my own home was the worst part. I started a logbook, a simple spiral notebook, where I recorded each incident. The date, the time, the details. In my old job, this was the first step to diagnosing a problem in the system. You gather the data. You look for the pattern. After 3 weeks, the pattern was no longer a suspicion, it was a conclusion. These weren't random glitches. The frequency, the specific nature of the accidents, they all pointed to a deliberate, coordinated campaign. This wasn't chaos. This was an attack. And you cannot fight an enemy you cannot see. So I decided to get eyes. I spent an evening online researching. The technology was incredible. Tiny cameras no bigger than a thumbnail disguised as smoke detectors or USB chargers. They were called nanny cams. The irony was not lost on me. I was buying them to watch my own child. I ordered a set of 3. They arrived in a discreet brown box. That night, after I was sure the world was asleep, I installed them. One in the living room tucked away on a bookshelf. One in the upstairs hallway with a clear view of my office door. And one at the top of the basement stairs, hidden inside an old, non-functioning smoke detector on the ceiling. Then I waited. For a few days, nothing happened. Life went on. I tended my garden. I read my books. A small, insidious part of my mind started to wonder if I had been wrong. If I was, in fact, just a paranoid old man making connections that weren't there. Maybe Amelia was right. Maybe I was losing my mind. Then came Saturday afternoon. They called ahead saying they wanted to drop by to check on me. Amelia's voice was full of that sweet, fake concern that now made my skin crawl. I told them I would be in the garden out back. It was the bait. And they took it. That night, my heart pounding in my chest, I sat down at my desk and opened the playback software on my laptop. I fast-forwarded through hours of empty rooms and shifting sunlight. Then I found it. The timestamp showed them arriving at 2:15. I watched them walk into my living room. I saw Amelia call my name, her voice echoing faintly in the recording. Hearing no answer, she gave Kevin a nod. The performance was over. The real work was beginning. I watched as Kevin, my daughter's husband, walked directly to my office. He didn't search. He knew exactly where I kept my financial statements. He pulled the folder, laid the documents out on my desk, and began photographing each page with his phone. Methodically, efficiently. He was harvesting me for data. But that wasn't the worst of it. After he was done, he walked out of the office and went to the top of the basement stairs. The view from that camera was clear as day. I watched him pull a small multi-tool from his pocket. I saw him kneel down and carefully, deliberately loosen the 2 main bolts holding the top of the wooden handrail to the wall. Not enough for it to fall off immediately, but just enough so that the next time someone put their full weight on it, my full weight, it would give way. He was creating an accident that could have sent me to the hospital or worse. An accident that would have proven once and for all that I was no longer capable of living alone. And then came the final soul-crushing blow. I switched to the hallway camera, and I saw my daughter, Amelia. She wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't distracted. She was standing at the end of the hall, her back to the living room, watching. She was the lookout. Her body was tense, her head swiveling back and forth, guarding the hallway, while her husband laid a trap for her father. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a pressure so immense I thought my heart would simply stop. It was the soundless, catastrophic collapse of the last pillar of hope I had been clinging to. I leaned forward and closed the laptop. The pain was still there, a hot, searing grief, but something else was rising through it. Something cold and hard and clear. The hurt father was gone. The analyst was back. The system was compromised. The threat had been identified, its methods and its agents confirmed. My daughter was not a victim in this. She was a co-conspirator. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that I was now alone in this fight. The time for defense was over. It was time to hunt. I saved the video files to 3 separate encrypted hard drives. I labeled them Evidence A, B, and C. My hands did not shake. The father in me was grieving, but the analyst had taken control. A system had been compromised. A threat had been identified. The next step was not confrontation. It was intelligence gathering. You never engage an adversary until you understand the full scope of their operations. So I did not call them. I did not text. I let them believe their little war of attrition was working, that the old man was slowly succumbing to the fog they were creating. Let them think I was a problem to be managed. In reality, I had become a project manager, and Kevin Marshall was now my sole project. I sat down at my desk in the office he had so casually violated. In logistics, you learn that every shipment, every product, every single box has a paper trail. From the factory floor to the customer's hands. There's a record of its journey. You learn how to read those records, how to see the story they tell. A delay in one port can signal a storm 1,000 miles away. A man, I reasoned, is no different. Especially a man like Kevin. A man that slick, that confident leaves a trail. I started with the name he was so proud of, the one he had mentioned at the wedding, with such theatrical importance. Marshall Properties. I typed it into the search bar. The first few pages were the predictable marketing fluff. A generic website full of stock photos of smiling families and promises of building your dream. It was a flimsy digital storefront designed to look legitimate. I bypassed it and went straight to the public records databases, the digital county clerk's offices, where the real stories are told. I paid the $15 fee for a comprehensive business search. And there it was. Marshall Properties LLC, registered in the state of Arizona 4 years prior. I noted the address, a post office box in Scottsdale. The first red flag. Legitimate developers have offices, not mail drops. I kept digging. The next hit was a bankruptcy filing. Not for the company, but for Kevin Marshall personally. Filed 3 years ago in Phoenix. I paid another $10 to download the full court document. It was a roadmap of his failures. Credit card debt in the 6 figures. Unpaid car loans. A list of creditors that ranged from luxury department stores to payday lenders. He was financially desperate. That wasn't just a motive, it was an engine. An engine that was constantly running, always needing more fuel. Then I found the civil lawsuits. There were 4 of them, all filed against Marshall Properties LLC. One from a lumber supplier for $30,000 in unpaid invoices. Another from a roofing contractor. A third from a landlord for a broken commercial lease. All of them told the same story, a story of promises made and bills left unpaid. And all of them ended the same way. Dismissed. I read the judge's findings. In each case, the lawsuit had been dismissed because Marshall Properties LLC had no assets. It was an empty shell, a legal shield, designed for one purpose: to absorb liability. He would run up debts under the company name, and when the bills came due, he would simply let the company dissolve, protected by the corporate veil. He hadn't just failed in business. He had weaponized failure. It was his primary strategy. He was a ghost, leaving a trail of financial wreckage while he himself remained untouchable. The printer in my quiet office began to hum, spitting out page after page of his history. I was no longer just a father-in-law. I was an archivist compiling the story of a predator. And the first chapter was now complete. The documents I had printed formed a neat, damning stack on my desk. Bankruptcy filings, dismissed lawsuits, a constellation of corporate shells. It was a clear picture of a financial predator, but it was an impersonal one. It was the skeleton of his operation, but it lacked the heart, the human cost. Lawsuits against suppliers could be dismissed as the cost of doing business, a sign of ambition rather than malice. To truly understand the man I was dealing with, I needed to find his real victims. The ones who didn't have lawyers or corporations. The ones he had targeted personally. My search moved from the sterile world of legal databases to the wild, chaotic landscape of the internet itself. I started searching his name, Kevin Marshall, combined with terms like scam, fraud, and real estate Arizona. For hours, I waded through digital noise, but late into the night, buried on the 5th page of search results, I found it. A link to a small, outdated-looking website. It was a simple online forum, a support group with the title, Stop Real Estate Fraud. I clicked the link. The page was a relic from an older internet, all blue hyperlinks and basic text. But in the search bar for the forum, I typed his name. And my heart stopped. There wasn't one post. There was a thread. A thread with 17 replies titled simply, Kevin Marshall, Phoenix area. I read every single word. The stories were all slightly different, but the blueprint was terrifyingly the same. A man who lost his down payment on a condo that was never built. A young couple who paid for expensive upgrades on a new home only to find the work was never done and the money was gone. And then I saw the recurring theme, the one that made the hair on my arms stand up. He targeted the elderly. He would find seniors living on fixed incomes, befriend them, and convince them to invest their retirement savings in one of his can't-miss development projects. He would show them the same kind of glossy blueprints he had shown me. And once the money was transferred, he and Marshall Properties would simply vanish. One post, longer and more detailed than the others, stood out. It was written by a user named Sarah B. Zhao. She laid out her story with the heartbreaking precision of someone who had gone over the events 1,000 times. She was a retired school teacher. Kevin had charmed her, convinced her that a $150,000 investment in a commercial retail space would secure her financial future. It was her entire life's savings. After she wired the money, the weekly update calls stopped. His phone was disconnected. The address for Marshall Properties was the same empty post office box I had found. She had lost everything. At the end of her post, she wrote something that made me sit up straight. I have all the emails. I have the signed investment contract. I took it all to the police, to the district attorney. They said because he operated through an LLC, it was a civil matter, not criminal fraud. They told me I could sue, but they knew, and I knew that there was nothing left to sue for. I found the button to send a private message. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I introduced myself. I told her I believed I was Kevin Marshall's current target in Colorado. I asked if she would be willing to speak with me. I hit send and stared at the screen, my own reflection looking back at me, tired and old, but with a new, dangerous light in my eyes. The reply came less than an hour later. Her name was Sarah Bishop. She gave me her phone number. The next morning I called her. I listened for an hour as she poured out her story, her voice a mixture of shame and a fierce, burning anger. She told me every detail, her words painting a portrait of the exact same man who had sat at my dining room table. When she was finished, I told her what I needed. "Sarah," I said, "the police couldn't help you because you were a single case, but a pattern of behavior across state lines, that is a different story. That is a federal crime." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard her take a deep, steadying breath. "I'll email you everything," she said, her voice no longer sounding like a victim, but like a soldier. "You get that, son of a bitch." 2 hours later, my inbox chimed. A single email from Sarah Bishop. Attached was a zip file containing scanned contracts, transcripts of voicemails, and a long chain of emails filled with Kevin's false promises and blatant lies. It was a complete record of his predatory playbook. This was not a lawsuit. This was not a civil complaint. This was the weapon. This was the silver bullet. And I finally had it in my hand. With Sarah Bishop's evidence, the skeleton in my file now had a soul. It had a human voice. The time for passive intelligence gathering was over. It was time to set the trap. And the most effective trap is the one the prey helps you build. I knew what they wanted to see, the role they had already cast for me. And so I began to play the part of the confused, defeated old man. My performance began with a phone call to Amelia. I deliberately sounded flustered, asking her if she remembered what day the trash was collected, a schedule I had known by heart for 40 years. I let my voice trail off. I pretended to forget what I was saying mid-sentence. I could almost hear the triumphant smile on the other end of the line. "It's okay, Dad," she cooed, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "Don't you worry about a thing." A few days later, they came over. I made sure the house was a little messier than usual. A newspaper left on the floor, some dishes in the sink. I answered the door looking tired. During our conversation, I misplaced my reading glasses while they were on top of my head. I saw the quick, knowing glance they exchanged. It was a look of pure, unadulterated victory. They thought they were winning. They thought the pressure campaign was working, that my mind was finally cracking under the strain. They didn't understand that a systems analyst knows how to simulate a failure to test the response. And their response was exactly what I had predicted: pure, naked greed. While I was playing the part of a man losing his grip, the real me was working with a focus I hadn't felt in years. I spent 2 days compiling my research into a single comprehensive dossier. I included my own log of their gaslighting campaign, the video evidence from the hidden cameras, Kevin's bankruptcy filings, the records of his shell company, and at the very front, a detailed sworn affidavit from Sarah Bishop, complete with copies of her emails and fraudulent contracts. I made 3 identical copies. One was for me. One was packaged and sent via courier to Detective Miller at the Denver Police Department. The third and most important copy went to the State Attorney General's office, specifically to the Consumer Protection Section that handled cases of elder fraud. In my cover letter, I didn't write as a victim. I wrote as an analyst. I laid out the clear, indisputable pattern of behavior. I highlighted how Kevin used LLCs to shield himself in civil cases, and how this new evidence of interstate activity targeting seniors with identical methods elevated the matter from a simple business dispute to a criminal racketeering enterprise. I wasn't asking them to help a helpless old man. I was giving them a finished case tied up with a bow. The next step was the hardest. It felt like a betrayal of Carol, of every memory we had built. But I knew it was the only way. I had to let go of the house to save what it truly represented. I didn't call a realtor. I didn't want a for sale sign on the lawn tipping my hand. Instead, I contacted a private real estate investment firm, a company that specialized in quiet, all-cash transactions. I told them the situation was a sensitive family matter and that I required absolute discretion and a fast closing. They saw the value of the property and agreed. We met in their downtown office. I signed the papers. My hand was steady. I sold my home, the repository of my entire adult life. The closing was officially recorded on Monday afternoon. The money was wired to a new bank account, at a new bank, an account Amelia and Kevin knew nothing about. My house, my beautiful brick ranch, now belonged to a corporation, and nobody knew but me and them. With the trap fully set and the safety net in place, all that was left was to spring it. I waited for their call. It came on Friday evening. It was Kevin. His voice was smooth, confident, and full of false concern. "David," he said, "Amelia and I have been talking. We're really worried. We think it's time to make a decision for your own good." This was it, the final act. I took a deep breath and summoned the voice of a broken man. I let a tremor enter my words. I think you're right," I stammered. It's just too much. The house, the bills. I can't keep up." I could hear him holding back his excitement. "We understand completely," he said, the sympathy in his voice so fake it was almost comical. "I've actually been talking to a colleague. He has a client, a family who would love this house. They're willing to pay cash close quickly. It would be a huge relief for you." "Yes," I whispered. "A relief." "Great," he said, moving in for the kill. "I'll have my notary bring the papers over on Tuesday morning, around 10 o'clock. We'll get everything signed, and we can start moving you into Golden Meadows next week." "Okay, Kevin," I said, my voice barely audible. "Okay, do what you think is best." I hung up the phone. I sat there in the quiet of my living room in a house that was no longer mine. There was no joy, no triumphant feeling, just the cold, quiet satisfaction of a complex machine, perfectly calibrated, its gears beginning to turn. The countdown had begun. He had given me the time and the date of his own destruction, and all I had to do now was wait. With the evidence secured and the first official reports filed, my role had to change. The analyst and the archivist had done their work. Now it was time for the actor to take the stage. To catch a predator, you must present yourself as the perfect prey, wounded and helpless. It was a role I despised, but it was one I knew I had to play to perfection. My performance began with a series of carefully planned phone calls. I would call Amelia and ask the same question twice in the span of 10 minutes. I would sound confused about what day it was. The most effective was when I called her in a manufactured panic, claiming I couldn't find my wallet. 10 minutes later, I would call back full of sheepish relief, explaining that it had been in my jacket pocket the whole time. On the other end of the line, I could hear the cloying sweetness in her voice. "Oh, Dad, it's all right. These things happen. Are you sure you're eating enough?" Every word was a pat on the head to a child, not a conversation with a father. They invited me to their apartment for dinner the following week. This was my main stage. I made sure to arrive looking a little tired, a little less put together than usual. I let them guide me to the sofa, as if I were a fragile antique. Over dinner I complained. It was the first time I had ever truly complained to them, and they soaked it up like dry soil in a rainstorm. "This house," I sighed, pushing my food around my plate. "It's just getting to be too much. The yard work is endless. The stairs, they seem to get steeper every year." I looked up at them, putting a look of weary resignation on my face. I'm not sure how much longer I can manage it all on my own. I watched as a look passed between them, a silent electric flash of pure triumph. It was the look of two players who had just drawn the winning card. Kevin leaned forward, his face a perfect mask of concern. "We know David," he said, his voice soft and gentle. "We've been worried about that. You shouldn't have to carry that burden all by yourself." Amelia reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her touch felt cold. "That's all we want, Dad," she said, her eyes wide and earnest. "We just want you to be safe and comfortable. We want to take care of you." I looked at her hand on mine, the hand of the daughter I had taught to ride a bicycle, the hand of the woman who had stood guard while her husband tried to arrange my death. The disgust was a physical thing, a sour taste in the back of my throat, but my face showed only tired gratitude. The crowning achievement of my performance was when I forgot my wallet as we were leaving. We had stopped for ice cream on the way home, and when it was time to pay, I made a show of patting my pockets in a rising panic. Kevin stepped in immediately, waving his credit card at the cashier with a magnanimous smile. "I've got it, David. Don't you worry about a thing." In the car on the way back to my house, he and Amelia shared another one of their looks in the rearview mirror. They were sure of it now. The old man was broken. The fruit was ripe for the picking. As Kevin walked me to my front door, he put a hand on my shoulder. "David," he said, his voice firm but gentle, the voice of a man taking charge. "We need to move forward with a plan. For your own safety. We can't risk you having a real accident over there. It's time to act quickly." I looked at him, my eyes downcast, and gave a weak, slow nod. "I know," I said, my voice just a whisper. "I know you're right." He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture of final absolute control. I watched them drive away, their headlights cutting through the darkness. They thought they were in control. They thought they were the shepherds guiding the lost sheep. They had no idea they were the ones being herded step by step into the pen I had built for them. While I was busy playing the part of a man in decline, the real me was executing the most important logistical operation of my life. My quiet, empty house became my command center. My desk was my war room. The grief for the daughter I had lost was packed away, replaced by the cold, clear focus of a man with a singular mission. The first phase of the operation was to deliver the weapon I had spent weeks building. I laid out the 3 copies of my dossier on the dining room table. Each one was a thick, heavy stack of paper, a testament to Kevin's crimes. I had organized them into tabbed sections, the Arizona frauds complete with Sarah Bishop's sworn statement and email chains. The Colorado gaslighting campaign with stills from the security footage and a timeline of events. The financials detailing his bankruptcy and the structure of his shell corporation. It was a professional, undeniable record of a predator at work. In my cover letter to the Attorney General's office, I was careful with my language. I didn't write as a scared old man. I wrote as a concerned citizen and a former systems analyst. I wrote, "This is not a simple case of a family dispute. The attached documents demonstrate a clear and repeatable pattern of predatory behavior targeting seniors across state lines. The suspect, Kevin Marshall, uses corporate shields to evade civil liability while systematically defrauding his victims. He is currently active in Colorado, and I am his next target. This is not just an attack on me, it is an attack on the integrity of our community." I made it clear that helping me was helping themselves. I sent the packages via a registered courier, the kind that requires a signature upon receipt. The paper trail was now in their hands. The second phase was the most difficult. It required me to sacrifice the queen to win the game. I had to sell my house. The thought was a physical ache, a betrayal of every memory I had shared with Carol within these walls. But I knew it was the only way to truly protect her legacy. A house is just a building, I told myself. A legacy is something that can't be bulldozed. I didn't call a realtor. A sign on the lawn would have been a red flag. Instead, my research led me to a private real estate investment firm called Peak Legacy Investments. Their motto was, "Discrete transactions lasting value." They were exactly what I needed. I met with their representative, a sharp professional woman named Miss Albright, in their sterile downtown office. I laid out my terms simply. I wanted an all-cash offer. I wanted to close in 10 days. And I required absolute legally binding confidentiality until the deed was officially recorded with the city. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. She probably saw a dozen old men a month, all in desperate situations. But as I calmly and clearly stated my terms, I saw her assessment of me change. She saw not a victim, but a client who knew exactly what he wanted. They made a fair offer. It was less than what I could have gotten on the open market, but speed and secrecy were worth more to me than cash. We signed the papers the following Friday. My hand was steady as I signed my name, the same signature that was on the original deed from 42 years ago. It felt like closing a book, the final chapter of a long and happy story. The closing date was set for Monday, one day before Kevin planned to bring his fake notary to my door. The house I was sitting in, the home I had built, was already gone. It was a ghost, a stage perfectly set for the final act. All the pieces were now in place. All the legal and financial machinery was in motion. And the actors, my daughter and her husband, had no idea the play had already been written, and they were the villains about to walk into the light. The trap was set. Every legal document was filed, every dollar was secure. My house, the stage for the final act, was legally no longer mine. Now all I had to do was send the invitation. I waited. The call came on a Friday evening just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my living room floor. I looked at the caller ID. It was Amelia. I let it ring 3 times, then answered with a deliberately tired, slightly confused, "Hello, Dad. It's us." Amelia's voice chirped too brightly. I could hear Kevin whispering to her in the background. "We were just calling to check in. How are you feeling?" This was it, the final performance. I summoned every ounce of weariness I could, real and imagined. I let out a long, slow sigh that I knew would sound like pure defeat over the phone line. "I'm tired, Amelia," I said, my voice raspy. "I'm just so tired." "We know, Dad," she said, her voice softening into the practiced tone of a caregiver. "That's why we're calling. We think it's time to make a decision, to get you the help you need." I stayed silent for a long moment, letting the silence stretch, letting them think I was struggling to find the words. Then I gave them what they had been working towards for months. I gave them my surrender. "You were right." I whispered the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "All of it. You and Kevin, you were right. This house, it's too much. I can't manage anymore. Just do what you think is best." A beat of stunned silence on the other end. Then I heard Kevin's voice, unable to restrain himself any longer, jumping on the line. He was practically buzzing with excitement, though he tried to coat it with a layer of false sympathy. "David, you're doing the right thing. I promise you, this is for the best. And the good news is, I've already been working on it. I have a buyer, a wonderful family who loves the neighborhood. They're ready to move quickly." "A buyer?" I asked, playing my part. "So soon?" "Yeah," he said, the word coming out fast and eager. "They're very motivated. It's a cash offer, so it will be a clean, simple process. A huge relief for you. I'll have my notary bring the final papers over on Tuesday morning, around 10 o'clock. We can get everything signed and finalized right then and there. How does that sound?" I looked around the quiet living room at the ghosts of a lifetime of memories. A house that was already sold. A notary who was coming to a closing that would never happen. "Okay, Kevin," I said, my voice a hollow echo of the man I used to be. "Okay, Tuesday is fine." "Excellent," he said, the triumph in his voice now completely undisguised. "You just rest up, David. We'll handle everything from here." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone. I sat in my armchair as darkness fell outside the house, settling into silence around me. The performance was over. The invitation had been sent, and it had been accepted. He had given me the exact time and date of his own destruction. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. The countdown had begun. All I had to do now was wait for Tuesday. We are back where we started, in my living room. The air is thick and heavy. Kevin stands frozen, the color gone from his face, the name of his Arizona project hanging in the air between us like a verdict already delivered. My daughter Amelia is a statue in the doorway, her hand still holding a bag of donuts. Her cheerful smile from moments before, now a grotesque mask of confusion and horror. Kevin opens his mouth, a dry, rasping sound coming out the desperate gasp of a man trying to formulate a lie big enough to save him. He manages a single word. You. He is cut off by the sound of the doorbell. It is not a long, impatient press like his was. It is a firm, decisive chime. It is the sound of an appointment being kept. I don't take my eyes off Kevin as I walk to the door. I want him to watch. I want him to see the final pieces of the system he broke being put back into place. I open the door. Standing on my porch are two uniformed police officers. Beside them is a man in a detective's suit, who I recognize from his photo. And next to him is a sharp professional woman in a tailored business suit holding a leather portfolio. "David Harris?" the detective asks, though he already knows the answer. "Yes," I say calmly. "Thank you for coming, Detective Miller. Please come in." I step aside and they enter the house. The living room, which a moment ago felt large and tense, is now crowded and small. Kevin looks at the police officers, and a new, more primal fear enters his eyes. Amelia lets the bag of donuts slip from her fingers. It lands on the floor with a soft thud. The woman in the business suit, Ms. Albright, steps forward. She doesn't look at me. Her focus is entirely on Kevin. Her voice is calm, professional, and carries the cold, hard weight of legal fact. "Mr. Marshall," she says, "my name is Eleanor Albright. I am the legal representative for Peak Legacy Investments. I am here to inform you that my firm finalized the purchase of this property, located at 124 Willow Creek Lane, yesterday afternoon. The deed was officially recorded with the county this morning at 9 a.m. You and your associates are trespassing on private corporate property." Kevin just stares at her, his mind clearly unable to process this new, impossible reality. What are you talking about?" We're buying this house." Ms. Albright allows herself a small, cold smile. "That seems to be a point of confusion for you," she says. "But I assure you my paperwork is in order. I must ask you to leave the premises immediately." Before Kevin can even respond to that, Detective Miller takes a step forward, producing a folded document from his jacket pocket. "That might have to wait," he says, his voice a low rumble of authority. He unfolds the paper. "Kevin Marshall, you are under arrest for multiple counts of felony fraud theft by deception and racketeering. We have an active warrant for your arrest from the state of Arizona, and the Colorado Attorney General's office has just opened a formal investigation into your activities here thanks to a very comprehensive file we received." He gestures with his head towards the file in my hand. "It seems your business practices have finally caught up with you." One of the uniformed officers steps forward and takes Kevin's arm. The fight goes out of him completely. The charming con artist, the master manipulator, vanishes. In his place is just a scared, defeated man. He sags as the handcuffs click shut around his wrists. Amelia lets out a strangled sob. "Dad, what did you do?" As the chaos erupts, the fake notary, Mr. Peters, who has been frozen by the door this whole time, makes a break for it. He tries to slip out the still open door, but the second officer is faster, grabbing his arm with a firm grip. "I don't think so," the officer says. "You're going to have a few questions to answer yourself." I watch as they lead a handcuffed Kevin out of the front door of the house I no longer own. He doesn't look at me. He can't. My daughter stands amidst the wreckage of the life he promised her, her face streaked with tears, looking at me as if I were a stranger. And perhaps I was. They had only ever seen the quiet, gentle father. They had never imagined the man who had been patiently waiting for them underneath. The wail of a distant siren was the only sound that broke the silence. The police were gone. Kevin was gone. Ms. Albright had given me a crisp, professional nod before she left, and the house was finally terribly quiet. I was left alone with my daughter. She stood in the middle of the living room, a single fallen donut by her feet, her body racked with shuddering sobs. The beautiful, confident woman from the wedding was gone, replaced by a broken stranger. Finally, she looked at me, her face streaked with tears and incomprehension. "Why," she choked out the word, a raw wound. "Why, Dad, why would you do this to us?" For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I let the mask of the calm analyst fall away. I let her see the pain that had been living behind my eyes for months. My voice when I spoke was not angry. It was heavy with a sorrow so deep I felt it might pull me to the floor. "I didn't do anything, Amelia," I said softly. "I didn't have to. I just gave Kevin the rope and his own greed tied the noose. He was a predator, and he was going to destroy you along with me." I took a step closer, my gaze holding hers. "But you stood and watched him do it. I saw you, Amelia, on the camera, standing guard in the hallway while he was loosening the railing on the basement stairs." "My stairs?" The color drained from her face. The last of her denial crumbled, leaving only the ugly, naked truth. She had been caught. Not by the police, but by her father's watchful eyes. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "The money," she whispered the question, reflexive. The house is gone." I said, my voice turning factual again, the voice of a man explaining the terms of a contract. "I sold it last week. Part of the money was used to rent a new apartment for myself, a smaller place, more manageable." I paused, letting the weight of the next words settle. "The rest of it, the majority of the proceeds from the sale of this house, I used to create a trust." Her head snapped up, a flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. "A trust for me?" "Yes," I said. "It's called the Carol Harris Trust, in your mother's name." I saw the name land on her like a physical blow. "It is an irrevocable trust, Amelia. That means it cannot be changed. It cannot be dissolved. It is managed by a third-party financial firm. Not by me. Not by you." I laid out the terms, my voice as steady and final as a judge's verdict. "You are the sole beneficiary. The trust will provide you with a monthly stipend. It is enough to rent a small apartment and buy groceries. It is enough to live on, but not enough to live the life Kevin promised you. And the payments are conditional. You must hold a steady job. You must remain free of any legal trouble. If you fail to meet those conditions, the payments stop." I let that sink in before delivering the final crucial detail. "The trust is structured to protect what your mother and I built. It is designed to protect it from predators like Kevin, and from the choices that led you to him. He can never, under any circumstances, touch a single penny of it. Your mother's legacy is safe." She just stared at me, the full scope of what I had done finally dawning on her. She hadn't just lost her husband and the promise of a $2 million duplex. She had lost her freedom. She had been placed in a system, a set of rules and consequences, designed by the very man she had tried to cheat. I hadn't disowned her. I hadn't destroyed her. I had given her something far more terrifying. I had given her a lifeline tied to the one thing she and her husband had tried so hard to avoid: responsibility. I had given her one last brutal chance to save herself, and now the choice was hers alone. 3 months have passed. I live in a new place now. It's a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a quiet building on the other side of town. It is smaller than my old house cleaner, with less to carry. From my living room window, I have a clear, unobstructed view of the Rocky Mountains. They are vast and silent and permanent, and they remind me that my own dramas are very, very small. I have found a measure of peace here that I didn't realize I had lost. On the small dining table, there is a cardboard box. I am packing it to send to Amelia. I haven't spoken to her since that day. The trust sends her the monthly stipend, and her lawyer sends me a brief formal update once a month. She has a new job, the report says. An entry-level position at a marketing firm. She has an apartment. She is starting over. Inside the box, I have placed a few things. Her mother's favorite cookbook, the pages soft and stained with vanilla. A small locket with a picture of the two of them inside taken on a beach long ago. And a simple paperback book I picked up last week. Its title is The Choice for Responsibility. I add no note. The contents of the box will have to speak for themselves. Next to the box is a letter that arrived yesterday. The postmark is from Phoenix, Arizona. It's from Sarah Bishop. Her handwriting is the elegant looping script of a lifelong teacher. She tells me that with the evidence I provided, the district attorney's office has reopened her case and is now pressing criminal charges against Kevin. Thank you, she wrote. You gave a voice to those of us who had lost ours. You did not just seek justice for yourself, you sought it for all of us. I fold the letter and place it in a drawer. It is a good thing to be reminded that one small correct action can send ripples out into the world. My gaze falls on the framed photograph on my bookshelf. It's Carol squinting happily into the sun in the backyard of our old home, the maple tree just a sapling behind her. I pick it up, my thumb brushing away a speck of dust on the glass. The legal documents refer to the sale of a property, an asset. But it was never just that. It was our home. And a home is not just a building, it is a promise. A promise to keep a place safe, a place of dignity and love. I look at her smiling face. You can rest easy now, Carol, I say to the quiet room. I kept our home safe. I put the photograph back. I did not get my house back. I did not get my daughter back, not the one I remembered anyway. But I did not seek revenge. Revenge is a fire that consumes everything. I sought something quieter, something stronger. I sought the simple, profound peace that comes from restoring order, from protecting what is important. And in the quiet of my new life with the mountains watching over me, I have finally found it. The core lesson of this story is that true strength often lies not in loud confrontation, but in quiet resolve and meticulous planning. It serves as a powerful reminder to never underestimate the wisdom and experience of an older generation. David's journey illustrates that when faced with greed and betrayal, the most effective weapons are intelligence, patience, and a deep understanding of the systems others take for granted. This was not a story of revenge, but of the restoration of order. It teaches that justice is not about destruction, but about protecting one's dignity and legacy with calculated precision. If you believe that true strength is found in wisdom like this video, subscribe for more stories and share your thoughts in the comments below.